In my last video, we took a look at this Apple II Plus and we went over all of these amazing cards that I found inside and discovered that there were 3 or 4 different mods inside of this thing. Someone really loved it. Well, in this video, we're going to try to get this system working. It didn't work on the last video when we tried to power it up, so let's get cracking and see if we can get this thing up and running. It's coming up right now on Retro Hack Shack After Hours. Well, hello Shack hackers and welcome back to Retro Hack Shack After Hours. Yes, this is the system we looked at in the last video. If you haven't seen that video, you might want to go back and watch it because I talk about what we discovered inside and what all these cards are that are sitting over here. So yeah, definitely take a look at that because I won't be going over a lot of that information again as we try to get this Apple II Plus up and running. First of all, I want to thank everybody for watching. This is part of the E-Waste Wednesday series. So this is a follow-up video, but normally, yes, I go to E-Waste on Wednesday. And to make things a long story short, that's where I found this Apple II Plus. But first, I want to thank all my patrons who donate to the channel, support the channel, and I really appreciate all of their support, not only monetarily, but also just words of encouragement as I'm going through some stuff physically. You know, they've been really, really encouraging, and I put a lot more updates on personal stuff like that on my Patreon page, which you can join if you're so inclined. But yeah, this looks a little bit different than when we last saw it. And that's because if you remember, I said that the people at E-Waste had thrown out the lid. And I even asked if I could dive into the big dumpster. There's a big, huge 40-foot dumpster that all of this stuff ends up in because they fill up a small dumpster, then they put it in that big 40-foot one. And I said, hey, can I, climb in there and look for this lid? And they said, no, that one was just emptied yesterday, so we don't have it anymore. So even if it got thrown in there, it's gone now. So that was really sad. But one thing that they did have with this system that I didn't show on the last video, because I kind of went long and never got around to it, is this TV or monitor, Zenith monitor, that somebody used with this actual system. They brought it in at the same time. If we have time today, we can go ahead and try to get this working as well. As for the lid, that is a whole story in and of itself, and I'm not going to make you wait this time until the end of the video to hear it. So I got this lid to this Apple II Plus in a huge hoarder clean out at another e-waste place where they got pallets and pallets of old Apple gear. Someone had been hoarding this either in a warehouse, a storage facility, a basement. I don't know exactly where, but there were pallets and pallets full of this stuff. So not only Apple IIs from pretty much every vintage, but also bunches and bunches of monitors, both Apple II monitors, Apple III monitors. There were one-off TVs and things. There were special color composite monitors that, you might have used with an Apple II GS. There were printers. I mean, the list goes on and on and on. All in all, I think they had maybe 10 pallets full of this stuff. And if you don't know how big a pallet is, I mean, that's enough to put probably 30 or 40 Apple IIs in. So someone had been collecting for a long time and probably picking these up from schools as the schools got rid of them and then saving them somewhere. So I was able to go down there and pick up not only the lid for this particular Apple II Plus, but I picked up 6 or 7 other spare systems, a bunch of spare disk drives, floppy drives that I can get spare parts from. So I figured, you know what, it's a good opportunity. They were relatively cheap as they had so many of these things. And I thought it's a great opportunity to go ahead and stock up on spare parts. So I did that, and those are now sitting in storage. And I'm sure not only with this lid, but the other spare parts that I have available to me now will probably come in handy as we try to get this particular computer up and running. So since the system isn't working, I'm not going to be able to see anything on this TV or monitor, I should say. Technically it's a monitor. I'm not going to be able to see anything on it until we can get this working or until I hook up another video source. But I did just want to plug it in and see what happens if we get high voltage when we turn it on. So when I turned it on just to test it out, not really seeing anything initially. Not feeling any static, and I wasn't seeing, maybe there is just a little bit of static there actually, but watch what happens if I leave this running for a little bit. I have both the brightness and contrast turned all the way up, by the way. Usually at this point, on most systems, you'd see a raster, but this might be a modified TV, so maybe it's designed a little bit differently. Anyway, watch what happens if I turn it off and then turn it back on again. Just for a minute, we get a very bright, some lines in the middle there. I'm going to turn these down just a little bit. I'm going to turn them both down. Let's see what happens now. Yeah, that's better. Just for testing, that'll be better. But there's just a blip of, like, it's trying to draw lines. It's trying to generate a raster, and then it collapses. So I'm not sure this is actually working, but it doesn't look like it's completely faulty either. Like, it looks like maybe there's just some adjustments that need to be made. Maybe we got a bad pot or something. I'm wondering if we could actually get this on, or maybe it has a circuit in there that turns the video part of this off if it's not getting a signal. That's also a possibility. Anyway, I just wanted to show what my initial findings were on this Zenith monitor. All right, well, just for good measure, I went ahead and took apart the power supply. Someone in the comments had shared a story of one of their power supplies that had blown, and they had suspected it was the reefer cap on the inside. And of course, if you watch this channel, you know I'm no stranger to reefer cap explosions. I've had several of them while working on machines, while recording. But yeah, this one looks completely fine. Up here where the plastic reefer would be, that those dry out and go bad and release the magic smoke and stink so bad, it's got a different type of capacitor up there. So we're good on that. And all the other caps, there's no bulging. There's no leaking that I can see. Everything looks as good as the day it was born in here. Really, really nice. These older caps these would be from the late 70s probably, or maybe 1980 or so. I mean, these typically don't go bad. They can, of course, especially if they're next to a regulator or something that gets hot, they can dry out. But yeah, this thing was running perfectly when I tested it. No reefers in here, and it looks great. So I'll close it back up and we'll move on. You know who else makes great looking PCBs? Why, it's the sponsor of this video, of course, PCBWay. PCBWay offers low-cost, high-quality PCBs and a whole lot more. I'm sure if you were to make your own mods for the Apple II, you could upload them to their community page and people could order those directly from PCBWay. It's a great service for the community. While you're there, you can look into their flexible PCBs, aluminum PCBs, or their assembly services, and I thank PCBWay for their sponsorship of this video. All right, so I went ahead and took the language card out, and I also took the font card, lowercase font card out from Laser that we saw in the last video. And there was a few chips on here, like this one and this one down here, that were just lifted from the board. When you put in this mod, it just pulls those chips out and puts them in this board instead. So I transplanted those back down to the motherboard, the original motherboard. But now I'm missing the original character generator chip, which is, I believe, a 2513. And those 2513s were actually pretty common for computers, especially in the 70s. I know that most of the Apples, the Apple I that I rebuilt, the reproduction I made, definitely used a Signetics 2513. I think it was pretty popular. If you take apart older machines, especially the ones that ran that basic uppercase font, I'm not sure what the Commodore used, Commodore PET, for example, and I'm not exactly sure what the TRS-80 used, the Model 1 and maybe later models, what they used for their character generator. But I know from working on a number of these systems from this time period that the 2513 was quite popular. So I'm going to need another 2513. Of course, I have a number of Apple II machines sitting around that probably have this chip in them that are good and working. But as I mentioned, I went to that other e-waste place and found a bunch of old, dirty Apple IIs, and I got a couple Apple II Pluses. This is one of them. It's really nasty. This is why this is only used for spare parts. It's got some nasty oil stuff on here. But if we take this apart, there's some wood on the inside, but there is a full motherboard here and a full keyboard. So I can replace, there's a key missing, I can replace that key, and I can get the 2513 hopefully off of this Apple II and use that to troubleshoot this motherboard. Well, hey, I just wanted to share. I wasn't going to do this. I was just going to jump cut back to the board that I'm actually working on. But wow, I didn't realize how bad this was. I know I said there was wood in there and stuff. I don't know where this thing was stored. It really, really looks bad. It is an earlier board, though. It looks like this may have been from one of the early runs of Apple II Pluses that actually used the Apple II original, I don't know what you want to call that, boards, because it's really bad. It doesn't have the memory. I don't know what they are over here, if they're resistor packs or whatever. Typically you see those over on right here next to these boards. It doesn't have those, and that's a good sign that this is either a very, very early Apple II Plus board or this was just upgraded from the Apple I. Because really, I keep saying the Apple I, the original Apple II, released in 1977. Because really that original Apple II, the only difference is they upgraded some of the ROMs on the motherboard, and that was pretty much it until later when they came out with some slight revisions to the motherboard itself, and that's pretty much the only difference between the original Apple II and the Apple II Plus. The bottom case to this was all rusted out. I had to drill out several screws. You can see just how rusted maybe some of these screws are. Had to use WD-40 and drill out a bunch of them. And yeah, it was pretty nasty. And the board itself is pretty nasty. So what I'm going to do, just for fun, I'm going to go ahead and clean this whole thing off just to see if it will boot. I don't know what the chances are. I put them at maybe 1% that this thing will actually boot. But if it does, I can not only use this as a donator board for the one that I'm actually working on, but I can use it to test against and see, what's working and what's not. All right, well, this thing is back from a bath, not only a bath, but a really good scrubbing and a rinse in isopropyl alcohol to get rid of some of this water, and then dried out in the sun. I pressed on all the chips just to see if, any of them were loose, and a few of them went in a little bit, but nothing major like I would expect when chips really start popping out of their sockets. So I just thought, let's just go for broke and see if this thing works. The other thing I did was I pulled out my pocket microscope, aka my phone with a macro zoom lens, and I looked at a lot of these traces, and a lot of them looked like they had bad spots in the traces or breaks in the traces, probably from corrosion, because the top of the board up here is really pretty corroded and a lot of that ground plane there is eaten away. But the other traces, I also saw a lot of spots in the traces, just random spots. It was really weird. So I broke out my multimeter and I actually probed those traces where I could to see if any of them had failed. I didn't, of course, test all of them, but I tested a few and they were perfectly fine. So I'm guessing that's just either surface corrosion or something on those particular traces, but they do seem to have very low resistance on them. So I guess it's just a cosmetic at this point and hasn't really eaten anything away. Of course, who knows what's going on this board, but I figured, hey, what the heck? It's a donor board. I got it for very cheap. Let's just see if something this old, this dirty, and this corroded is actually working. Now, the one thing I don't know is the polarity of the speaker. This is connected to the RGB to HDMI right now with the new audio board. So many of you have purchased the recently announced audio board that you can solder onto your RGB to HDMI and now push sound through to the HDMI output. If you haven't ordered one, do it now. They're going fast, and I don't know when I'll be able to order more. So take advantage of that while you can. But let's just go for broke and see if this thing boots up, blows up. There's no shorts on it. I did test the rails on the board, so there's no shorts, but let's just see what happens. Here we go. Ooh. Okay, I'm hearing some kind of high-pitched noises when I turn this thing on, which I think is normal. So something's going on with this board, but no booty. So that's to be expected with a board that was in this bad shape. Hopefully, though, this character generator is good. So I'm going to pop this out of the board, put it in the other one, which is the main focus of this video, and we'll see if we can get this board to boot. Okay, I've got the character generator in, and the other chip that I added was I went ahead and stole one of the memory chips from that donor board. So now we have a fully populated memory section here, although I'm pretty sure I've booted an Apple II up without this first memory chip in there. And it could be because it's looking for memory a little bit later on and it doesn't use this memory when it first boots. I'm not sure, but pretty sure that I have booted up without this memory chip in place. Could be misremembering or forgetting because I am getting older, but all that aside, let's go ahead and boot this thing up and see if we get a screen or a beep. In this case, I don't have to use the audio input on the RGB to HDMI because we've got a speaker here. So let's just go ahead and see with all these chips in place now whether this thing is working. Here we go. Oh, we're getting something. That's a good sign. It's not exactly what we want, but it is something. It's weird that we're getting no beep. There is another mod that I didn't cover on the other video, which was this audio mod. I think it just turns the speaker on and off. Let me click this the other way and reset and see if we get a beep. Yep, we do. So the sound was turned off. That's all that switch does there is just turn the speaker on or off. That's pretty easy to do, but at least we're getting a beep, and we've just got some character issues on the screen, it looks like. Hey, I just got this tinfoil wrapper out of this box, if you remember. The box that was stuck or was in the side of the case here with spare parts in it from the last video. I got that out, and inside the tinfoil I found not only the laser character generator that we saw in the previous video, but I didn't realize I unwrapped the tinfoil a little bit more and I found the original 2513 that had been pulled out of this machine and swapped out for that board, that laser board that we saw. So I went ahead and put the original 2513 back in that came with this computer just to see if the other one was maybe messed up that came out of that donor board. And now we're getting even more progress. So we've got Apple II, but we've got flickering on the screen. And so something, and it seems to be going faster and faster. The flickering, let's try that again. Did you see that, how slow it was going? Oh, now I've got nothing. Turn it off for a little bit. Okay, here we go. So you see it flickering, and it seems to go faster and faster, or maybe that's my imagination. But yeah, so we're getting closer here. All right, well, I've gone ahead and deoxided the CPU and the ROMs, and I turned it back on, and that is not having any effect, excuse me. And I did want to go ahead and try this trimmer over here. Oh, okay. That is definitely having an effect. So it goes from bad to, if I turn it all the way to one side, it's almost there. And just to make sure it's not the RGB to HDMI. RGB to HDMI is complaining right now about color sync, by the way. Do we have an issue on the cord? Maybe. There might be a bad ground pin. See how that's all flaky? Let's see if I can hold it steady. I think we have multiple issues going on. If I hold it steady, I do get a sync, but we're still getting a lot of flakiness. Okay, so I've seen a few of these that behave a little oddly with the RGB to HDMI. I just want to test this, like I mentioned before, on a real Apple II monitor. So let me zoom into that so that we can get a closer look, or you can get a closer look, and we'll see what happens. I've got it plugged in. So there's a little bit of a reflection there. I apologize for that, but I think you can see it okay. So let's go ahead and turn it on. Here we go. Yeah, looks solid. That's as far in as I can zoom. There's no flicker, no nothing. So whatever's off with the sync rate and the RGB to HDMI on this particular Apple II looks fine on an actual monitor. So probably, you know, whoever was using this before would have never seen this. Like, this is something that only manifests itself with the RGB to HDMI. So I'm going to go ahead and say that's enough fiddling with this issue for now. Maybe I can come back to it later in another episode, but we'll just deal with the flicker on the TV and know that it seems to be something specific to the RGB to HDMI, not a problem with the Apple II itself. Okay, quick tip for those RGB to HDMI users who might be having the same problem. Let me show you what I did to fix this. I went into the sampling menu. You can see it's jittering all around there. And then I went to the YV sync. Maybe I changed this at some point on my own. I don't know, but mine is currently set for 10 or 0.13 volts. And I went in there and turned that down to 1, which is 0.01 volts. And that pretty much fixed it. Let me get out of here, and I've still got a little bit of noise there that we can clean up, but that's pretty much fixed it. And now if I turn the video intensity down, you can see it kind of works like you would expect, right? At some point it goes away, and then you can turn it either, all the way up, or it's pretty much stable now, all the way from when you first start to see it by turning the video intensity all the way up to the top. It's pretty stable. At least it's not going crazy like it was before. All right, well, I've got this, well, we're in a video mood here, I guess. Let's go ahead and first try this Super Mod 2. I showed this in the previous video if you want to take a closer look at it. But it's a little mod, looks like an RF modulator, and there is a auxiliary video pin here on the motherboard. So all we really have to do to test this to see if it's working is to, since there's already a connector here for this mod, we just need to make sure we hook it up the right way. So we need to see what pin is ground on this auxiliary video connector down here, because I'm not really sure, I'm not really familiar with it. Now that was a beep on my multimeter in continuity mode, but it went away, so that's going through a capacitor. But let's try the other side over here. Oh, there we go. There we go. So we've got ground. We've got ground. Ground is the pin on the far right side. And now what we can do is we can take the little connector here and we can see which one of these pins is ground on this side. I'm going to assume it's black. That's what I would make it anyway. And if we just touch the case over here, yep, perfect. So black is ground, and we know that the far right pin is ground, so we can then go ahead and hook this up with black going over there. Okay, now on this particular mod, there's two, I don't know if one of these is an input and one is an output. We'll just have to test them and see. But there's two RCA jacks, one on the top of the Super mod. Ooh, that's got a little, I could swear I was getting a little juice there. And this is not turned on. Interesting. This could go badly. Yeah, so anyway, there's one on top of the Super model RCA jack, and then there's one in the back here. I'm going to assume that this is the one that would be the output, but maybe this is also an input. So I don't know. We'll just have to plug it in and try it. So I'm going to go ahead and plug in let's try this one first and see if we get anything on that. And if we don't, I'll go ahead and hook it up to the other RCA jack and see if we get something there. Okay, so hopefully you can see the TV up there. I've got it tuned to channel 3, so let's just go ahead and turn this on and see if we get anything out of the system. Oh, we do, sort of. So for those of you who remember this type of mod, you know that I am actually hooking up the cable into the wrong jack. I'm actually connecting it to the input jack, which is also tied into that auxiliary chat. So this is having the effect of now sending the composite signal, which the TV doesn't know how to understand, over to the TV. And so we will be able to see a little bit of kind of a signal on the TV, but it's nowhere near the type of signal that the TV is expecting. So keep that in mind as we go through here, and I will rectify that in just a minute. There is a potentiometer on the Super mod. Let's just see if this is tuned into a different station. This might be working. I can see Apple 2 there. Well, that's too bad. I can see something on the screen. It does say Apple, but not really getting anything out of the Super mod that is going to make this legible. Okay, so I went and looked up some information on the Super mod. You can still find the documentation out there. And so, yeah, I was on the wrong port initially. I kind of was afraid of that. So the port that's facing the rear of the unit, or the rear of the computer, is auxiliary input if you don't, for some reason, have this Apple auxiliary jack connector. So you could potentially use this RF modulator for other computers if you wanted to. But anyway, I don't need to use that. I do need to, the output is on the top of the Super mod box. And so now I'm plugged into that. And I also learned that this outputs, I forgot, a lot of these older RF modulators outputted to UHF, like channel 22, or in this case, channel 33. The Super mod is designed to output to UHF 33, not VHF 3. So I've got it plugged in. I've got the Apple II on, and let's go tune the TV and see if we can get anything here. I think what I was seeing on channel 3 was just some crossover, almost interference from the signal. It was just picking up some of the signal from the Apple II. So let's go ahead and see if we tune this to the right station, if we actually get a signal here. Well, I'm on channel 33 and I am seeing a little bit. I see the Apple II kind of swimming around here. Let's see. I might need to adjust that pod again. Oh, it's going out now. I go the other way. It's coming in. It's coming in. Oh no! It's all the way to one side and I still can't get it to come in. So perhaps we've got a resistor or a capacitor that needs to be replaced or something. Let me mess with this just a little bit more, but I think the SUPR mod is on its last legs here. All right, well, what I've done now is I've taken the SUPR mod, the RF modulator, and hooked it up to a different Apple II. This is an Apple IIe, another one that I've been working on for a little bit, but it does work, and it's a little bit more modern. So I thought we would go ahead and try that RF modulator on it and see what it does. So I've got this connected to the TV and I've got all the lights off that I can turn off. It's daytime right now, so that's why you're still seeing a reflection of my garage windows. But let me go ahead and turn this on and we'll see if this actually works on a different Apple II, because we saw that flakiness on the Apple II Plus that is the subject of this video, and I just kind of want to rule that out as something that's getting in the way. Maybe this will work perfectly. Who knows? Let's just take a quick look. Okay, now I actually have this on the cable signal because I was getting a little clearer signal on that, but you have to, 33 isn't the same now, so it's actually on cable 11 where I get the clearer signal. And you can see you can see the Apple II there. Hopefully you can see it on screen. Sorry about that reflection, but it is there. The problem is when I start typing in words, it's very faint, by the way. And when I start typing in word or letters like this, it starts getting all wonky. So yeah, it is working on this machine, but it's just not very clear. It's probably pretty worn out. I did change one of the capacitors in there that was reading a lower value than it should. It was out of spec, and it was just a disc capacitor that I changed just to see if that would help, and it's not really. All right, so now this is hooked up to a more modern RF modulator from Radio Shack, probably from the 90s by the looks of it, and you can see it's actually working quite well, and it's quite readable. So it doesn't have any of those wavy lines. It doesn't even have any adjustments. That's all done automatically by the chips that's in the RF modulator. So that looks perfectly fine on my other Apple II. This is the Apple IIe that I've been testing with. Now let me hook this up back to the original subject of this video, the Apple II Plus that we've been testing, and see what it looks like there. All right, now what you're seeing is the output of the Apple II Plus, the original one we're working on. There's definitely something wrong with that video signal because it is not as strong. It is outputting all of those fringy colors. It's got the NTSC artifact colors on that text, which makes it really hard to see in general. But beyond that, the signal is just a little bit wonky. So there's definitely something going on, but I think it's okay to continue to test. But anyway, coming out of the composite into a modern RF modulator and into this TV does work. So unfortunately, the SUPR mod RF modulator is getting a little tired and not quite working right. Now, some of you eagle-eyed viewers out there may have noticed this orange wire over here. And so while I was considering the video problems, I was wondering if maybe this orange wire was somehow connected in a way that was influencing the video output and was causing a problem. So I went ahead and I took the motherboard off the bottom of the case, which is kind of a pain because you have to unclip all of these plastic standoffs here and get the board off there. But I went ahead and did that. And then by turning this thing over, we can see that this orange wire runs from this chip up here, which I'll get to in just a minute. It just kind of runs down the side of the board and goes over here to this connector over here. So what is this orange wire connected to? Well, it turns out that this orange wire isn't connected to the video circuit at all. It's actually connected from the keyboard connector here, the keyboard socket, all the way up around to, I think it's this one, the LS251 up here. And it's connected to pin 1 up here, and it's connected to pin 4 on the keyboard connector. So maybe those out there that understand the Apple II better than me can help me and put some information in the comments below. I did some research. I looked up the schematics. This pin on, this one on pin 1 on the LS251 up here is connected to the game port, and it's connected to, I believe, the 3rd pin, which is, or maybe the 4th pin. I think it's the 4th pin up here, which is switch 3. There's actually 3 switches buttons basically that you can have on a joystick on the joystick connector here, switch 0, switch 1, and switch 2. Why did I say it was the third switch? Well, because it starts at 0. So it's actually connected to switch 2, which is the third switch. And I'm assuming that most joysticks would probably, even a 2-button joystick, would use switch 0 and switch 1, which leaves switch 2 for something else. So I'm not exactly sure what switch 2 would have normally been used for, but switch 2 is actually connected all the way down here, like I said, to the keyboard. It's on pin 4 of the keyboard, and pin 4 is normally not connected. And I'm assuming that has something to do with the way that this thing hooks up. This laser board, I mean, I don't know what else it would be for. Maybe there was another mod in here at some point that made use of that not connected pin here to do something. But I mean, yeah, the only thing I can think of is that somehow there was a button that you could press perhaps that would change the font maybe on this laser lowercase board. And you could hook up some sort of button externally or something like that and then press that, and then that would have changed the font for you. That's the only thing I can think of. But if you know better than me, like I said, I really need help with this one. Why in the world would that be connected to a not connected pin on the keyboard socket here? Interesting. All right, time to put this back together. Okay, well, I'm doing some repair work on the controller that I inadvertently blew a couple of these chips by plugging in the cable the wrong way. Thank you, condition of my eyes, for that. But yeah, I blew some of these. I'm just going to go ahead and replace them all. But more than that, we can see now where this bodge wire actually goes on the keyboard by using the schematics or tracing this out manually, which you can definitely do with a multimeter. But basically, we've got this orange wire here, which does correspond with pin 4, the one that's normally not connected. That one is going over here to the shift register right here, and that is connected to this jumper pad over here, pin 24, and then by going to the actual keyboard, we can see that pin 24 is connected to not just one, and you can see this on the schematics if you have the Sam's photo fax or computer fax. They did a pretty good job of documenting this version of the keyboard controller. You can see right on the schematic that this actually maps out to not just one key, but 2 keys. It maps out to the shift key on either side. This is switch 53 over here, and this is switch 42. I think I might be getting that wrong, or 48, 43, one of those. Anyway, I might have the numbers wrong, but that actually does, I'm not going to turn this over, but it actually does map out to the shift keys on the keyboard. So whoever had this thing, now we know that they wired in that alternate switch, switch 2, or the third switch on the joystick connector, to the shift keys. So I'm guessing you could use the shift keys in games, or maybe a particular game that this person was playing, to fire a weapon or jump or something like that. So it's pretty cool that we can go back through and diagnose and see what this mod is doing. And this is a very, very simple and very useful one. I'm wondering if those people that had Apple IIs back in the day also did this to play a certain game, or maybe have a quick key on a particular program or something like that. If you did, let me know in the comments below. Aaron from editing here, and I guess I got pretty close with my assumption there. The shift key was actually most popularly used by word processing programs like Apple Writer and WordStar. There were options to enable that shift key mod, which would help you type out your lowercase letters. Pretty cool. Maybe we can test this out in the next video where I test out those cards. And there's also this yellow wire here again, which I kind of looked that up, and that is connecting one of the other not connected pins to ground. So I believe this must have something to do with that laser character generator board. This must be a required mod for that, to bring ground over to a different pin for some reason. But that shouldn't hurt anything in getting this particular keyboard up and running, because it shouldn't be connected to anything normally. Okay, and we have our next problem. The keyboard is back installed. I did switch those, changed out the logic chips. There was one of them that was blown, but the other 2 tested okay in the Retro Chip Tester Pro. So we just had one bad chip, and everything else looked okay on that board, unless the whole keyboard controller IC is dead, which I don't think it is. That would be unlikely, but it could happen. But what we have right now is no keys at all. And I've tested all the keys, and I also don't have power anymore. So something else is going on. Reset, nothing. Control reset, nothing. I mean, sometimes you'll get like some flakiness on these keyboards, but usually when you exercise the keys a bunch of times, you'll start getting something on the keyboard, and I'm getting nothing. All right, so I'm wondering if the problem is in the keyboard. It could be part of the strobe, which sends the signal to look for key presses, basically. It's a signal that goes continuously, and if you press a key, it'll detect that during that timing and type the key on the keyboard. I'm wondering if the problem is something like that, where we've got a chip that's gone bad, or whether the keyboard really is that bad. Maybe it's just super dirty, all the keys. And luckily, because of the mod that was in place on this thing, and I did reattach that mod when I fixed the keyboard controller board, we can actually look, because that's a direct link. That wire is a direct link all the way over to these shift keys. At least that's what I assume based on my research. And so if that is the case, we should be able to see, when we press the shift, we should be able to see the pin that it's connected to up here on this chip go to ground. So if I go ahead and connect to ground here, this is going to be a little bit tricky. And I connect to that pin, which I think is up here. Hopefully we got that right. And if I hit shift, we should see this go to ground. Let me go back over into resistance mode so that we can really detect if anything's happening. So right now I've got 5K, and it looks like this is going through those capacitors that are on the controller card. There's probably some capacitance there to ground, and that makes sense because there was definitely some 5K resistors on that board. But let's go ahead and hit shift and see what happens. Now, nothing's happening. Oh, wait a second. I saw something shift there. No pun intended. Oh yeah. Did you see that? It dropped down to like 32 ohm just for a second. There we go. It's dropped down 230 ohms. Yeah, this is actually working. So the key, let's try this shift key because it should be connected to both of them. Come on, am I getting anything? Oh, yep, there it goes. 100 ohms, back up to 5K, come on. Did you see that bouncing around? I mean, that's definitely telling me that these keys are just super dirty. 55 ohm, I saw it go down to, and then 200 ohm, and then I let go, goes back up, and that capacitor is balancing it out, but it's getting down to 5K again. So it could be that these key switches just are really that bad. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and pull the keycaps off on one of these and see if I can clean out one of these switches to the point where it's actually responding, and then we can test that to see if we're getting the actual encoded key press through the system onto the screen. But first we have to make sure we have a key that's actually working. All right, well, I did put some deoxide down here in the one key. That should be pretty easy to see, right? And so if we turn this on, we get we don't really even have isn't there a flashing cursor usually? Anyway, we should see a 1 here, right? If we type 1, and I'm getting nothing. And I did measure this with my multimeter, and when I press this button, I am getting good low resistance on that particular switch, so we should see it, and we're getting nothing. So now I'm wondering if maybe the strobe signal is not working, and so because all of these chips on the early Apple IIs are socketed, I can find that chip and take it off and test it and see if it's working, and if not, we can replace it. So that's what I'm going to do. Actually, before I do that, let's just pull out the oscilloscope and see if I can see those signals, and that'll be quicker than pulling and swapping chips. So I do also want to make sure I'm getting 5 volts on the keyboard connector, because obviously if there was no voltage, either the 5 volts or the negative 12 volts coming through for some reason, a broken trace or something, then that also would cause the keyboard not to work. So let's go ahead and turn this on, and I believe pin 1 is down here, and that's where I should be seeing 5 volts. It's a noisy 5 volts, but it is 5 volts. Now let's see if we're seeing the strobe on pin 2. Now, I don't think so, right? Because shouldn't the strobe be, it looks like it's like 2 volts. I think the strobe should be strobing, right? Shouldn't it be going like kind of like a clock signal? Am I not getting that right? I thought the strobe should be going up and down. Well, we'll see. I also want to take a look at -12 here. So this is also an issue because -12, it looks like is -7 volts. Let's just measure this with the actual voltage meter side of things here. And let's see, what can I connect to? I can connect to this. And let's just go ahead and take a look at these voltages again. So this should be, oh, I've got to turn this back on. Okay, this should be 5 volts, and it is. And I believe this should be -12. Oh yeah, it is. So I don't know why the oscilloscope part was reading -7, but that's definitely -12.8, even a little high or low, depending on how you look at it. But that's okay for the negative voltage rail. It should be fine. So yeah, the voltage rails are there. But the strobe was like just reading a constant 2 volts. Is that normal? I don't think so. Okay, so that 2 volts on the strobe signal, I mean, it could be a result of not having the keyboard actually connected. Maybe it's just floating. The way the strobe signal actually works is when you press a key, it's kind of like an indicator to the system that a key has been pressed. So when you press a key, that strobe signal should probably be sitting most of the time at 5 volts. You press a key, the signal goes down to ground and then back up again when you let go of the key. So it's kind of an indication to like, okay, read what that character is when you see that strobe go low. So the fact that it's sitting at 2 volts, like I said, could be a problem, or it could be just because the keyboard is disconnected. I'm not actually sure. All right, the keyboard is hooked back up. Let's see what the strobe is doing when we turn the system on. Now, I've got to make sure I've got the right pin. This is chip B10. I think it's an LS74 LS74. And I think I'm making good contact with pin 11, which should be the strobe input, basically, from the keyboard. So let's just go ahead and power this up and see what the strobe is doing when the keyboard is connected. Oh, and it does go up to 5 volts. So it was definitely floating because the keyboard was disconnected. So with the keyboard connected, we're back up to 5 volts. And if I press the 1 key, we should see that signal go low. And I am not. I'm not seeing anything on the strobe. So I want to say this definitely looks like a strobe problem. It's a symptom. I don't know if it's actually a problem. I mean, could it be that for some reason that IC is being held up to 5 volts for some reason? I don't think so. Aha, we're getting somewhere. So what I did was I took the keyboard off and plugged the controller back in because I wanted to see if how the strobe was working and what was keeping it from working. And while I was probing around, all of a sudden, whammo, I got keys. The keyboard is not attached. So I think what happened was I made the strobe go low for a second and it just picked up a bunch of random crap and actually created characters on the screen. So what that tells me is, for one thing, the character generator, which I assumed was good anyway because we were getting Apple II here, the character generator seems to be working and everything seems to be working, but the strobe, at least as far as I can tell, has an issue. So what I'm doing now is I'm just probing this logic chip here, and this is the strobe signal. So I trace that back to this 74 LS00 chip. This is one of the ones that I did not replace. This one actually tested good. But anyway, here is the output. And then pins 1 and 2, I believe, have to be high in order for the strobe to go low. So there's pin 2. Pin 3 is the strobe. So there's pin 3. Pin 2 needs to be high, and it is. And pin 1 is also high. So we should be getting a strobe signal when we press a key. It doesn't make any sense. Like I said, obviously I did something here to generate some keystrokes. So what the heck did I do? Oh, I'm wondering if the ground of my probe accidentally connected with some of these pins here, which go to the keyboard, and that's what caused these characters to generate. Yes. So by grounding these pins, which are the keys on the keyboard, we can see that we're getting keys. Where was it? So we're definitely getting some keystrokes just by manually grounding those pins, which is the same action you would get if you pressed a key. So now what I want to do is go back to that strobe. It's happening by itself now. I want to go back to that strobe and make sure that the strobe is dropping. So we're getting key presses. Oh, there it goes. Yeah, the strobe is working. So the strobe is working. So it appears that this controller is working. So maybe there's dirty pins or something connecting these pins here to the keyboard, the actual keyboard structure itself. Maybe these pins aren't making good contact there. That's the only thing that I can think of, because we're obviously getting key characters and the strobe is obviously working when we ground out those pins like it should. Let's check out the connections on the keyboard and see if those are dirty. All right, so the test that I want to do here is I want to just see if there's a problem with the connection. The way that the controller board attaches to the rest of the keyboard is through these pins here. And if you have corrosion up here where the pins go through to make their connection, it's kind of a press fit connection on these pins up here. If you have corrosion there, then obviously the signals won't be getting through to the daughter board, the controller card, the keyboard controller here, and of course they won't be getting to the controller chip or the rest of it. So I would just want to see if when I press the button or a key on here, make sure the signals are actually getting where they need to go. And so what I did was I looked up on the schematic. I'm using the Sam's version of the schematic, which is actually pretty nice for this. And it told me, you can see which key is connected to which pin on the connector here. So I've hooked up to pin number 2 and pin number 7. I believe those are the ones. So I've got these connected and I've got my multimeter hooked up. When I press the button, if the signals are getting through, we should hear the continuity beep go off. So here we go. Here's the number 1 button that we were testing before, and I've got, I think, correctly hooked up here. Here we go. Yeah, no problem. And very low resistance, 0.6 ohms. And that's probably just the resistance that's in the traces and the wire. So yeah, almost no problem at all. So the problem is not in the connection here. It's something else on this board. Oh man. This is a problem when you don't have good eyes, folks. And I apologize if you've been screaming at your TV or whatever, you're watching this on your phone or whatever this whole time, because you saw something that I didn't see. And when I was testing the chips on the board here, I was kind of in the right proximity to see something that I should have seen probably at the beginning of the video. So I apologize, but here it is. Can you see a problem here? Can you see a problem? Right here, no chip. This is a 555 timer, and this whole time I just didn't even see that the chip was completely missing from this socket. It says right here, 555. Boy, wow. I don't know how. I completely did not see a chip that was not even in the board. So let's put a 555 timer in here and see what happens. Okay, 555 timer going in. There we go. Somebody must have yanked this one for another project or something. Whoever this person was must have needed a 555 timer for something and yanked this out. Let's see if this is working. Let's see if this is working. Okay, keyboard is in. Everything's on. No, it's still not working, but I noticed something different. We actually have the blinking cursor, which is what that 555 timer is for. Before we didn't have the blinking cursor. So now we still don't have a working keyboard, but we've got a blinking cursor. We're one step closer. Okay, more clues going on. So you've probably noticed, I think I might have mentioned this before, that the power light on the keyboard is not coming on. And I also don't have power anymore. And that made me think, what if we're not getting 5 volts all the way through to the keyboard and powering that light bulb, but also not powering a lot of the electronics on the controller board here? So what I did was I took off, I first started probing around on the controller board and I wasn't seeing 5 volts. So I took that off and now I've just got the ribbon cable and I know there's 5 volts and ground here. I've already tested this with the multimeter on the right pins. So I've got 5 volts over here on the socket, but when I go through this ribbon cable here, there we go. Hopefully you can see the multimeter. When I go through this ribbon cable, I should have 5 volts. Here we go. Let's see. I believe it's here, and I don't. I've got 0.013, you know, it's just kind of popping around like that. However, when I move my ground cable, or my black lead here, which was attached to ground, I thought was attached to ground on the cable, and move it over to something that I know is registering as ground over here, which is the shielding on the RCA jack here, and I come back and I test the 5 volt pin now, let's see what we get. 5 volts. 5 volts. So what we have going on here is either a disconnected or bad ground on this ribbon cable. The ground is working. When I test it here on the actual socket, I get 5 volts using those same 2 pins, but when I do it on the ribbon cable, I'm getting nothing. So that means there's a bad ground connection coming through this ribbon cable. So let's swap this out, see if maybe that is the final straw here that's going to get this keyboard to work. All right, luckily I had a few of these extra long ribbon cables here left over from building my Apple One, and it's the same number of pins. So let's go ahead and see if we've got 5 volts now. Don't want to short anything out. Bingo, 5 volts. 5 volts right there. And just for fun, I think we should have -12 here. Is that right? Yeah, -12. Voltages are good. I think one of the many problems with this particular keyboard encoder was it wasn't getting a ground. Let's hook it up, see if it works. Oh, and look, we're already getting some oh, we can't see it. And just from doing the testing on that 5 volts, somehow we got some signals going through and got some underscore characters. So that's a good sign, I think. Okay, here we go. Is the keyboard going to work? Apple One, press the 1 key. Yes! Yes, success. In fact, most of the keys are working. Some of them are bouncy. It looks like they all need a little bit of love. Return is not working. Reset, do I need to do? Oh, look, power light is on. That's a great sign. Let's do control reset. Does that do anything? No, but yeah, the keys, a lot of these keys are working. Most of them are working. And I think it's just a matter of cleaning these other ones and exercising them a bit, and we will get this thing actually working. Ay. This has been a lot more difficult than I thought, but we are going to restore this for the original owner, whoever that might be. If you're out there, I'm working hard to get your baby working again. So I went through and tested all of the keys, and here are the ones that are dodgy or not working at all. Let's see if that'll focus in there. The ones with the B, like for example, this is the 6 key, has a B because it bounces. And the ones that have an X, like the 0 key, does not work at all. And that's actually not very many keys overall. I think we can probably go ahead and try to fix these really quickly. One thing to remember on this particular keyboard, there are different versions that came with the Apple II Plus. But one thing to remember with this one is they do have the top of the key switch here has a triangular or diamond-shaped platform under the key stem. So when you're going to get these keys off, be very careful, because if you use a keycap puller like this and you put it under the key that you want to take off, it's going to naturally want to grab that white platform, which is part of the overall stem here going down into the switch. And you could ruin a key switch that way. So let's see if I can do it. I know the Z is one that I need to take off. I'm going to get this thing in there, turn it at a bit of an angle, and then I'm going to try to get just the edges of the switch so that I'm not on that white part. And then we'll pull up. Did I get it? Yep, I did. There we go. So I got the Z key off and didn't pull up the top part of the key switch there. And then all I'm going to do at first is I'm just going to grab my deoxit and squirt a little bit of deoxit in there. Make sure this is off. It is. I'm hoping that's visible there. You can get in under this crosshatch, which is right there, and put a little bit of deoxit in there. And sometimes that'll just clean things up enough to bring the key back to life with some exercising. And I don't mean jumping jacks. I mean exercising the key switch. So I'm just going to go in here and let that drip down on that side, put a little bit on this side, put a little on the top. There we go. There's plenty of deoxit in there now. And just going to get some exercise here with the key switch. And now, if we power up the Apple II, let's see if the Z key is working. Yes, it is. And it's not bouncing, and it wasn't working at all, no matter how hard I pressed before. So it was just pretty corroded in there, I guess. And now it's working like a champ. No problem. So I'm going to do that with the rest of these keys. Okay, well, I was able to get all the keys seemingly working except for the S key. And so I went ahead and desoldered it. Here it is right here. And unfortunately, these Datanetics keyboards, some of the old ones, have these key switches that are plastic welded, like sonically welded or glued or whatever. They have a seam down the middle. You can't pop them apart or get to the insides very easily. And I was getting really frustrated. I couldn't get this one working no matter how much deoxit I used. And I was about to just take it apart to see what was inside. But then I decided to flush it with some alcohol. So I have this little bottle that I use for putting alcohol on. Usually I use it for like cleaning floppy disks where you don't want to, I don't like spraying on the cleaning floppy disk. So I have this thing, which is just a smaller applicator, and I can just put a little bit on there to clean my floppies. And so what I did was I took this and really squirted it in the key body here. And also there's some little holes on the underside, and I did those as well. I really kind of drenched it in this. And then while it was drying, I went ahead and exercised it a bunch and then let it dry all the way. And now it seems to be working, actually. I'm getting really good contact on it. So I'm hoping that wasn't, like, maybe there's something floating around in here and it's just going to make its way back to that same spot and cause a dead spot again and not work again. But it seems like for now it's working. So I'm going to put it back in the motherboard here, the keyboard PCB, and we'll see if it's actually working again. That would be great, because I know people give up on these because they can't get them apart, and when they finally go bad, there's not a whole lot you can do with them except replace them, and they're getting really hard to find. Well, the good news is that the S key is working. The bad news is that every key is repeating, like the repeat is always on. Whatever I hit just gets repeated. Okay, so I'm hoping this is just a problem with the repeat key, but hitting the repeat key and it's not going off. I can hit escape to stop it. Then as soon as I press a key, it just keeps going until the buffer's full. Okay, so I need to think through this problem a little bit, because the first thing that I thought of was the only thing I changed on this keyboard between the time that the keys were repeating and when they weren't repeating is the S key. So I double checked the S key to make sure there weren't any shorts or anything like that when I soldered the pins back in, and it doesn't look like there are any. I can't see any anyway. So because the keys are repeating, I went and looked to see if the S key was connected to the repeat key in some way. It is not. So I'm really kind of losing my mind here a little bit. So if we turn this thing on right now, let me make sure that no keys are being pressed just by gravity here. Now it's working? What? Now it's working. What the heck? This was not working a minute ago, and now it's working. What is going on? This changes my whole logic. I was just about to go into this big diatribe about what could be causing this, and I've been studying this for the past hour to see how the repeat switch works and to make sure that these mods here weren't somehow causing a problem. So what the heck? Well, I'll tell you, if this happens to you and the repeat key is not a problem, because I checked the resistance on the repeat key and it is not being pressed, we have these mods which puts a 13K resistor in here and a capacitor, which I think is some sort of a repeat mod, so you don't have to use the repeat key, because the way this should be working is if we hit a key, and now the H isn't working again, if we hit a key and hold it down, it is repeating without me having to use the repeat key. So that's the way I believe this capacitor, a diode, and a resistor, that's what that is doing, I'm pretty sure. But this was absolutely repeating nonstop a minute ago, and now it's not. So yeah, the other two culprits would be the encoder itself, which has been working up to this point, and the 555 timer, which produces that cycle to repeat the keys when you do hold down the repeat key. And Yeah, I mean, let's just see what happens if I hold down repeat. If I do P repeat, it does repeat the character and then it turns off as it's supposed to. I have no idea, guys. I have no idea. Something's heating up. Maybe the 555 timer on here is heating up and the reset line, which normally holds the repeat function or turns the repeat function off on the 555 timer until you hit the repeat key. Maybe that's warming up and maybe there's a borderline signal here. I don't know, but it is working, so we're just going to take this as a repaired keyboard for now, and if that repeat problem comes back, at least I've done my research and I've got a few ideas of what might fix this. And it looks like there's a few keys that I need to go in and work on again that I thought I had fixed. Most of them are working, but oh, there goes H. Again, sometimes you just have to exercise these to get that stuff off of there, but okay, well, on with the show, I guess. A fixed keyboard, randomly, by itself, yay! All right, well, this is already taking a lot longer than I expected, but I did want to do one more thing, which is just to see if there's something simple inside this Zenith monitor we can do to get it up and running. Maybe there's a scratchy pot or a loose connection or a bad solder joint or something like that. And that would be a simple fix and we can get this up and running. We saw before the green lines that came on when we turned off and turned on the set, and it looks like it's going to be a really nice looking green phosphor here. So let's open it up and see if we can see anything wrong. Now, before I open this up, I will say you need to be careful because these monitors, any CRT, contains high voltage and it can be quite easy to touch things that you shouldn't. So make sure you know what you're doing or ask a friend who's done this before to help, and make sure you're discharging those dangerous components before you stick your hands in there and perhaps cause some real damage to yourself. All right, let's go ahead and crack it open. Now, I don't think we looked at the back before, so I should mention quickly that the looks of this thing just screams late 70s or very early 80s. There's a switch on the back here that says characters, and then it has a 40 and a 30. So you could switch back and forth between those. Not exactly sure what that's going to do to the resolution on the front because I haven't used this monitor before, but we'll see. And then there's also a width control. Now, the width control, usually I would expect to see a vertical hold right here, but instead this one has a width control. That's very interesting. And it's got some more controls down here on the bottom, but over here we can actually see the date, and this says July 1981. So right in that time frame that I mentioned. All right, got the top screws off and the plate screws off. There's just a couple more down here at the bottom. I will say this thing looks very dirty, but structurally, I think under that dirt, once we clean it up, this thing is going to be in mint condition. And the color of this beige plastic certainly does match the color on the Apple II. If they already had the TV molds for the case, it certainly wouldn't be much to have those molds done in a different color plastic. I mean, maybe this was a TV mold that was gray or black or something like that, or two-toned, who knows. But yeah, it matches quite well. All right, now we can get the back off. And how do we get these boards apart? There we go. With a little finagling, I think I can get this through there. There, and there we go. We're in like Flynn. Very simple monochrome affair going on in here. Not much to write home about. It's just a monochrome monitor. Very few components on the board. It is a bit dusty and things, but I'm not seeing, from 1981, I wouldn't normally guess that these capacitors are necessarily bad right off the bat. I'm thinking more like one of these pots is going to be bad or need to be tweaked a little bit. You can see there is a transformer here right over in this corner, so that's good to see, but it's interesting that they placed it up where the speaker for the TV would normally be. So they're saving a lot of space by using or reusing that empty space where the tuner and the speaker would normally go. But you can see the cutouts up here, or at least I can see them, for what would be the tuning knobs right here, and it looks like there's another cutout for a speaker down below. So it looks like they were simply reusing those TV molds with this set. Surprisingly, the back of the tube itself is very clean. There's just a little bit of dust on there, but that buildup, that kind of grayish, blackish buildup that happens over time, just a tiny bit. It's actually quite clean for the back of the set. So I have good hopes that maybe this thing wasn't used too much or wasn't left on all night on a game like I used to do. Doing a visual inspection in here, I don't see anything crazy. No leaking caps that I can see, certainly no bulging caps. Of course, I've got a bad eye, so I might miss something in here, but yeah, it's such a simple board. It's pretty easy to do a visual inspection. Lots of electrolytics, that's for sure, but nothing, I don't see any fried components or anything like that. And we did see it start to come up, so that's a good sign that it is mostly working. So I think what I'm going to go ahead and do is put this down and give all of these pots a little bit of deoxit and a little twiddle here, back and forth a little bit, work them around, see if this thing will fire up. Okay, power is live, so hands away from the back of the set. I wasn't able to get in here. I can later if this doesn't work, but I wasn't able to get into the brightness and contrast to give them a little deoxit, but I wiggled them back and forth quite a bit. Let's see if we get anything different than we did before. Okay, looks like something. No, that's just the reflection on the table. So turn those down a little bit. Now I'm going to be careful and reach back here and see if anything changes on the, if I twiddle the knobs on the back, and then we'll hook it up to a computer, because a lot of times these monitors, if you didn't have a signal, they wouldn't do anything. So let's just go ahead and twiddle the vertical and horizontal hold here a little bit. Not really seeing much. Let me twiddle that width controller. No, nothing. Okay, well, let's hook up the Apple II. See what it does with a working signal here. Oh, that wasn't there before. So yeah, we're getting something here. Let me twiddle some more and see if we can make this thing work. This is looking good. Look at that. Apple II right there. No problems. The vertical hold. Let's see if that width thing does anything, that width control. Not really. The width control should do something, but I'm not seeing it. What if we switch this? Oh yeah, that's interesting. So I wonder if we do the 30, I wonder if that would look better with like an 80 columns mode or something like that. But it's looking pretty good like that. I'm going to switch it back to 40. And there we go. Yeah. This one, I think this monitor just needed a good signal and a little TLC. There we go. We've got some letters on the screen. Looking good. Hopefully you guys can see that okay. Looking really good. We can turn it all the way up. We don't want to do that, but that's what it looks like when it's all the way up. And I can turn this down just a little bit. It's not quite so bright. Yeah, this brightness control is definitely a bit dodgy as I'm moving it around. It definitely has some spots in it where it needs some cleaning. But overall, this thing is working just fine. I like it just like that. Awesome. Well, I'm just working on cleaning up this case, and I was wrong. It wasn't plastic injected molded, because the inside of the case is black, and you can actually see right here where they didn't really bother to spray the bottom of the case. So this is actually all paint on the outside, and probably the painting was easier than getting, the plastic injected parts. So they just spray painted the black ones. And when that happens, it's a really good idea not to use like rubbing alcohol or any kind of alcohol product to clean the marks and scuffs and things off the case, because it very well could take the paint off. So you'll end up with black marks or smudgy paint around if you use like 90% IPA or higher, and maybe even lower grades of IPA as well. So what I use is my handy dandy green scrubber, just like a green Scotch-Brite scrubber and soap, and that works pretty well. I just go really easy and make sure that I'm not scrubbing off any paint. The other thing you don't want to use on painted plastic like this is one of those melamine sponges, the Mr. Clean, whatever it's called, magic sponge or something, because that is an abrasive. It's like a very light sandpaper, and that will, of course, also take paint off. So be very, very careful when you're cleaning this, but so far, so good. All right, well, here it is after being all cleaned up. The Apple II Plus that I found at eWaste that was going to scrap, that was obviously a well-loved treasure of somebody's. And today we were able to work on the video a little bit, mostly working on the RGB to HDMI, but also some major troubles with the keyboard. But now all the keys are working. We don't have that repeating function anymore. If anybody knows what could have gone wrong with that, why it would suddenly be repeating and then no more repeating, let me know down in the comments. Let me know your thoughts. I went ahead and fully cleaned up the Apple II Plus and the monitor, and it's looking absolutely fantastic. The only thing that I can say is that because I used a lid from another system, it's slightly a different color of beige. This one is slightly more yellowed than the outer part of the case. But if you look at the earlier video, you will see in the beginning when I first had this kind of all together with the replacement lid, how dirty this Apple II Plus outer case was. And now it's the lid that looks a little bit yellower, even though I've washed both of them very, very thoroughly. And, you know, beyond that, I think if I brought this to some sort of fair or something like that, as I often do for kids to use, I don't think that they would notice that this was a mismatched lid. Probably only collectors would notice that. So this may have been the original condition when the owner bought it before he added or she added all of those cards over there. So we have yet to test out those cards, and that'll be on the next video where we test the 80 column card, the ROM card. Maybe even we can even see if we can get the lowercase mod working, as well as these disk drives. We need to see if we can bring these disk drives back to life, or if they're working with that strange one I showed in the last video. We need to check that out and see if it looks any different on the inside from any other Apple II floppy disk drive. And hopefully we'll get all these cards working just like the original owner had. If you like these types of videos on either e-waste or Apple products, I'm going to go ahead and put a couple links right over here on the screen. You can click on that video now, and I'll see you in that one next.
End of line.